It's called Namaqualand, after the Nama people, the Bushmen of long ago. And it's a part of our planet unlike any place else. Heat-blasted, frost-bitten, and wind-blown. But the Nama knew this land had a secret, the tenacity of the life that hides between its stones. They knew that the land could awaken and blossom into a paradise of flowers. And perhaps the Bushmen knew that the glory of the spectacle in some years outshines all others. Such a flowering happened in 1983, when after 20 dry years, Namaqualand put on its most flamboyant dress and showed the world an exceptional desert beauty. The reasons for this remarkable natural display are to be found in a diary of that Namaqualand year. This is not snow, but sharp quartz pebbles in the Knersflakte region. The word means gnashing of teeth, and perhaps was inspired by the grinding of the early trekkers' ox wagon wheels as they crossed this desolation back in the 1600s. It's hard to believe that it's now grazing land. There are plants here, 25 in this one patch, but you must look carefully. What look like buttons are fleshy leaves, but they also look like stones. There are a number of these stone plants. This one, lithops, keeps cool below ground, exposing only the surface of its leaves to the sun. By looking like stones, they may escape being grazed by animals. About 10 quite unrelated plants wear such a stony disguise. Some eyes are not deceived and learn to find food among the stones. On hot quartz, one way the ground-hugging plants survive months, even years without rain, is to store water in succulent roots, stems, or leaves. These dead-looking plants can respond to one shower of rain, swelling into new life. Gorged with water into strange shapes, the leaves make food in the sunlight. Then the plants flower and fruit. The most common family of plants here are the mesembryanthemums, or mesums for short. Each has its own daisy-like flower that opens in the midday sun. The little Mogelia is a mesum with succulent leaves, like lace balloons that seem to grow right out of the quartz. And these are called baboon's fingers. On the surface of each finger, winter dew condenses and trickles down to the roots. With the onset of summer drought, the temperatures rise again. The leaves die back, the water is drawn deeper into the plant, which then sits waiting for the next rain. In an average year in the Knersflakte region, the flowering may be far from spectacular. The canvas of desolation may bear only occasional daubs of color, but no one ever knows which years will produce real sparkle. Brackish lagoons and the Atlantic Ocean bathe Namaqualand's western border. Landward lies the region known as the Sandveld. In summer, a country regularly cooked to more than 100 degrees Fahrenheit. On the searing wind, the pale sand drifts inland. It shrouds the seed heads of the mesums in silver. In spring, a sea fog swirls around the bushes. Flamingos feed in the misty estuary of the Green River that flows only when there's abundant winter rain on the distant hills to the east. Every year, some corner of the sandbelt gets a shower or two, enough to send the succulent mesums reaching out over the sand and bursting into luminescent glory. A glory now familiar on many shores, since some of these plants have been introduced around the world. Not only the mesums, but the once dry and dead-looking bushes are transformed into pom-poms of daisies. Out, too, come the plants that survive the drought by storing water underground in bulbs, corms, and tubers. Their leaves are designed to survive the heat. Some curl, others cover themselves in spines or a downy fur that prevents water loss. Some lie flat and collect moisture underneath their leaves. Throughout Namaqualand, there are some 4,000 different plants. Only their flowering in response to rain reveals their enormous variety. But here a flower may emerge only once in a decade, and it may do so unseen and then lie hidden again for years. This wild gladiolus is such a flower. Having underground storage organs to survive drought is an alternative strategy to being succulent. Their flowers are pollinated by insects and are usually bright and gaudy, but that also invites animals to eat them. So many have evolved poisonous leaves to deter attack. As they wither, all signs of life vanish. But beneath the surface, they thrive, swollen with food and water. Though unseen, they may not go undetected. The mole rat, a relentless seeker of bulbs and tubers. Quite blind, it uses its distinctive teeth to burrow and its sense of smell to find the underground plants. The aerial leaves of the plants may be poisonous, and the underground parts too, but apparently the mole rats are immune to the toxins. By hoarding these bulbs, the mole rats may be helping their dispersal, especially since their cache is sometimes forgotten. It's known that they can move corms as much as 200 feet underground. The plant's heavy seeds don't go nearly as far, but merely drop to the ground. There's a close partnership in this underworld of plant and mole rat. Up above, on the sandbelt, sits a quite remarkable mesum. Found only in a few places along the coastal plain, it too emerges after rain and swells like a stone plant before bursting into flower. It's called Fenestraria, the window plant, because the surface of the leaf has a transparent window. This acts as a heat filter, deflecting the sun's heat but allowing light to reach the chlorophyll, lying well below the leaf surface. The leaves soon shrivel in the spring as the remaining water is drawn to the lower parts of the leaves and stored there. For 11 months it will lie dormant. buried beneath the windswept sand belt. There are mountains in Namaqualand. They're in the Richtersveld region. It stretches north towards the Namib Desert. At times, the rocks here are so dry, it seems impossible that roots could ever penetrate them. And yet, looking like abstract sculptures, some plants do find a footing. Many of the plants are found nowhere else, and all the tall ones are succulents. No trees could survive here. This is an aloe. Its spiky flowers and leaves are held more than 20 feet off the ground. For Aloe pilanzi, this is a last stronghold. A great forest of just 30 plants stands at Cornell's Cup, and around them, not one seedling is yet growing. Perhaps the climate is becoming too adverse, or some collectors may have been overzealous. But it could just be that the seeds are all being eaten as they fall. The Richtersveld is not short of seed eaters, among them the taktaki beetles. When not feeding, they tap out a courtship call. They drum against a convenient pebble and can summon up a partner with military precision. The parade of taktakis will end with mating. Of all the Richtersveld's plants, the best known is named Pachypodium namaquanum, meaning thickfoot of Namaqualand. Usually called elephant's trunk, it swells after the rains and holds the valuable water. The girdle of spines creates a dense and shady latticework on which moisture condenses. It's been suggested that each ring of spines marks a year of growth. If so, this one might be 1,000 years old. For most of the year, Pachypodium is dormant and leafless, but after a shower, an umbrella of leaves unfurls, and from among the spines, flowers appear. No one is certain what pollinates the blossoms. But it's the wind that later carries the seeds across the barren landscape. If a seed falls into a crevice where dew or moisture collects and runs into the sand, it can germinate in a mere 24 hours. But then it grows very slowly. This tiny plant may be 24 years old and is still growing next to its giant 1,000-year-old parent. Every pachypodium leans to the north toward the sun. Perhaps the crown of leaves protects the trunk from the glaring heat at midday. But the Nama people had another explanation and another name. They called them half-ments, meaning half a man. A legend tells that the Nama were driven south by warring tribes. As exiles, like Lot's wife in the Bible, they looked back toward their homeland. They were turned into these plants, which as half men always look with sadness to the north and home. Move south and the landscape softens. The rounded granite hills of the Klipkopi region rise above open, drab, sandy plains. It's moister, and it's here that Namaqualand's most colorful transformations can occur. No half-ments here, but there are other succulents known to the Nama people. They call this aloe the quiver tree. It bears branches that can be hollowed out to carry arrows for their bows. Oryx and zebra must cope with a highly unpredictable rainfall. Although Namaqualand receives less rain than some true deserts, what rain there is falls in winter and is more effective since it doesn't evaporate quickly. In our diary, it's December 1982, midsummer in the southern hemisphere. The waiting game has begun. A series of autumn and winter showers are needed if Namaqualand is later to show its best spring colors. The first 3 months of 1983 are autumnal, and clouds gather over the Klipkopi. Occasional cloudbursts drench a few isolated patches, a normal pattern of events. By late autumn, April showers are falling in the Sandveld and the Knærsflakte. But temperatures are still high. A single shower is useless. For a good show of spring flowers, there must be in winter a regular, gradual buildup of rainfall. The mesums respond immediately to the intermittent rains. Not their leaves, but their hard seed heads. The moisture temporarily swells the basket, revealing the seeds within. A raindrop can engulf a seed and bounce out, carrying it to the ground. It'll need another wetting there to trigger germination. The bulbs of oxalis sprout at the slightest sprinkling of rain. The Sandveld is decorated by salt lettuce and oxalis. The scatter of rain dictates the scatter of flowers. The sweet-scented drumstick and the arctotis daisies come out too. The temperature is falling, but that's no deterrent to these earliest flowers. Late June '83 sees a winter Namaqualand dusted in green. The early rains have been widespread. The signs are good for a spectacular spring display in September. But that promise could yet be broken by drying winds or an end to the rainfall. July, and a cold mist rolls into many areas. Days of winter drizzle set in. When the clouds lift, the winter cold catches those first flowers. The dew is replaced by frost, but the plants here can tolerate such extremes of temperature. Dew and occasional frost are always essential sources of moisture, especially in those years when there's hardly a drop of winter rain. By August of '83, the excess water finds its way into the dry riverbeds, and the Green River begins to run for the first time in 7 years. Plants that through the years of drought had gained a foothold in the dry water courses are tumbled from the bed. Winter creeps quietly into spring, and the greening of Namaqualand is complete, as rarely remembered. The country, though, still seems to hold its breath. The plants are poised for an explosion of color. The sun triumphs, and the flowers respond to its warmth, not in profusion, but here and there a daisy, a tribulus, and then in a sheltered corner, a blaze of mesums. Soon the once bare sand nods with color. The wild flax captures one small area, while nearby the early daisies steal the show. A patchwork of color stitches its way over Namaqualand. In our diary, it's the last week of August. Still late winter, but now it's obvious that 1983 is to be a spectacular spring. There aren't just scattered fields of blossoms, but the whole countryside is awash with color. It's this gloriously multicolored variety show of flowers that has made Namaqualand renowned the world over. Each day, this natural kaleidoscope is shaken to reveal new patterns of colors as different species open their petals. Nearly all of them are daisies, annual plants, which have evaded the drought years by lying dormant as seeds until now. Such a phenomenon must have amazed the 17th century explorers, though it's perhaps unlikely that they saw exactly this kind of spectacle. There would not have been these great single expanses of uniform hue, but a more diverse sprinkling of color. The reason? Over the years, this land has been farmed. When the soil is disturbed and turned, many annual plants seem to thrive. The pioneering farmers in the valleys of the Klipkappi and the Sandveld created their own patchwork among the wild scrub. Today, where a field lies fallow, the flowers take over. Here on the Klipkappi near the town of Springbok, for example, they tried to grow wheat, but because the soil is poor in essential nutrients, they failed after a few years. But what is poor for farmers is ideal for well-adapted daisies, annuals that have grown with Namaqualand over millions of years. their lifestyle honed by the poor soils and the unpredictable seasons. There are noticeably fewer grasses because of this climate. It's truly a land of daisy bushes. And here the yellows of Othona are swamped by the dazzling Dimorphotheca, the Namaqualand daisy itself. The domestic animals took to it from the early days on. They found the flower heads tender and sweet. In such a good year, news travels fast. This exceptional 1983 flowering soon brings in people. Even from the main road, there's a breathtaking private front seat view. Such a sight may not recur for 20 years. Tomorrow it could all be blown away by a searing east wind. At best, it's only a 3-week glory. But even such brief magnificence draws people to look and question. Why so many different daisies? Why such profusion here in Africa? Why such a diversity of colors? Some find easy answers, others remain a mystery. One question begs an answer above all others. How can all these flowers ever be pollinated? A legacy of seeds gave rise to this spectacle, and the flowers are the plant's aid to a reinvestment in the future. They must be pollinated by wind or insects, though this year there may not be enough insects to go round. A local name for Diascia is little horns. Each flower has long spurs and must attract insects that can probe into them. Senecio carries its pollen in open, shallow tubes, an invitation to bees, flies, and bee flies. Another bee fly is attracted to a mesum's luminescent petals and, guided by the white center, probes directly into the pollen. True bees work the flowers too, and so do beetles. Their life cycle is synchronized with the blooming. Hordes of tiny beetles swamp the flowers, and the flowers swamp them in pollen. It's a feeding bonanza, especially for this monkey beetle. Monkey beetles are not entirely good news for daisies. Although they play a role in pollination, they also eat a good deal of the pollen. Apparently, such unwelcome visitors can be outwitted by what's called the beetle daisy, Gortyria. These daisies are decorated with their own imitation beetles. 3 of their petals have a conspicuous black daub with 2 white eyes. At a glance, you could be deceived into believing the flower is already occupied. Perhaps the beetles are fooled as well and move elsewhere. But so far, there's never been time during the few weeks of flowering for anyone to prove it. Like the monkey beetle, many animals come with no other purpose than to eat. But they're not hidden from the watchful eyes of others. It's said that the peculiar rocking motion of a walking chameleon mimics the movement of vegetation blowing in the wind. The technique is probably more effective when it's clambering on a branch, where its changing color and skin pattern also help to disrupt its profile. The abundance of flowers provides food for all, whether insect, reptile, or mammal. The Namaqualand rock mouse eats anything within its territory: mesums, their leaves and sweet flowers, also daisies, whether in flower or seed. This is the height of their breeding season, and like the beetles, it coincides with the flowering. As temperatures warm up after winter, the tortoises become active, and they don't have to walk far for food. Choice items are the flowers' fleshy leaves. They eat them to the bitter end and leave no evidence of the flowers. But beneath, the bulbs will survive, and the plant will bloom again another year. For these helmeted guinea fowl, there's no shortage of food. They're seed eaters and move around in groups. The male's alarm call signals the presence of an intruder. This 3-week bloom is nearly at an end, but before the temperatures of early summer begin to rise, these annuals will set seed and hide in the earth. This colorful rug will vanish underfoot, but the promise of another paradise will linger in the soil. This year's diary is not yet at an end. Though the annuals will soon vanish, other plants, like the succulents, have been swelling their stems and leaves, and with the onset of September '83, there's a further flowering of Namaqualand. The quiver tree puts on a coronet of leaves, and to complete the transformation, it puts out spikes of flowers with tubular bells, irresistible to birds. A female cape weaver competes with a pale-winged starling. The pollen of the aloes flower sticks to its bill and throat, ready to be transferred. Even high on the seemingly inhospitable slopes and crags of the cliff copy, plants manage to take hold in natural rock gardens. The seeds of the lily, chincharinchi, and of the iris-like laperusia have been blown in or carried by a bird, and have found enough soil to hold their bulbs or corms. The patterns of weakness in the granite become a latticework of color as late annuals sprout from seed. The deeper fissures and cracks are the refuge of the agamid lizards and the rock hyrax. The cracks are necessary retreats from the hot sun and patrolling birds of prey. Oddly, for a mammal, the hyraxes control their body temperature by moving lazily in and out of the sun, rather like the lizards. They spend little time browsing and a good deal just sitting. They get the little water they need from the succulent plants and conserve it by passing dry feces and concentrated urine. They use a communal latrine, and it's here that one Namaqualand plant, Whiteheadia or elephant's ears, is usually found. Something in the chemistry of the droppings must be beneficial to Whiteheadia, since it's rarely found anywhere else outside hyrax territory. The season is advancing. On the heights of the Richtersveld, the bushman's candle signals the change by covering its stem with succulent waxy leaves. The leaves are short-lived, and as each falls off, the leaf stalk remains as a spine, which dries out and hardens to form a protection from browsing animals. By midsummer, the bushes, a species of pelargonium, will be quite bare, but now they burst into flower, each pastel shade vying for the attention of insects to pollinate it. It's not the blossom or the fruit that got them the name Bushman's Candle, but something the old Nama people knew, that the black resins of the succulent stems, when set on fire, burn slowly. There are wild geraniums here, too, South African plants whose hybrid offspring have filled window boxes all over the world. As summer approaches, they too die back, leaving only succulent stems that will keep them alive until the next winter rains. By now, a tide of purple mesums has replaced the daisies. In this second great flowering of Namaqualand, the perennials take over, from sturdy shrubs to miniature succulents. The name midday flower suits the mesums well because they open to their full glory at noon. Closed at dawn, they slowly open and follow the arc of the sun through the day, turning to keep their faces towards it, until the temperature falls and the late sun sinks down. They move almost as one, like a slow ballet played out day after day. There's one tiny mesum which opens at dusk. It's called jutta. As the sun sets, its yellow stamens are exposed and a strange scent is released, perhaps to attract a nocturnal moth. Many animals are drawn to mesums, again, not to pollinate, but to feed. Locally, the mesums are called fehis, and this is the fehi caterpillar. It's large, about the size of your thumb. They chew only the tenderest of succulent leaves, and some years they've been known to consume vast areas of mesums. When they reach the size of a small shrew, they drop off to go in search of a rock under which to pupate. The male and female caterpillars look alike, but once they've spun their cocoons, the fate of each is very different. Next winter, the male will emerge as a tiny winged moth and go in search of a female still in her cocoon. She is wingless and will never break out, so he cuts his way into her chamber and fertilizes her there, where she lays her eggs and dies. Within the cocoon, the caterpillars hatch. They emerge through the entrance made by the male and then go looking for fresh mesums. But it will be another 9 months before the start of that part of the saga of the fehi caterpillars. It's early October now, South African spring. The temperatures are rising, and the last of the winter rain has fallen. Mists blow in from the Atlantic. They condense and offer a little moisture to the drying soil, a benefit to the many plants that haven't flowered till now. But the color is fast draining from the land. In this desiccated landscape, many euphorbias have adapted to the drought. Their stems store water all year round, and they only produce diminutive leaves in spring, followed by some small flowers. The flowers attract ants, which drink the sticky nectar that lies conspicuously in these cups. The ants carry the pollen from flower head to flower head. Once the pollen is on the stigma, the ants' work is done, but it's thought that they also act as defenders, chasing off other insects that visit the plant. Many euphorbias have their own defense, a sap laced with sticky latex. No deterrent, though, to a parasite that lives off the roots of some euphorbias in the Richtersveld. It's a bizarre plant called hydnora. It has an ingenious way of attracting pollinators. It both looks and smells like rotting leather and lures carrion beetles into its fleshy interior. They tumble into the cavernous flower, falling onto anthers richly coated in pollen. Beneath, in the lower chamber, lies the female stigma. As the beetle scrambles in a futile search for putrid flesh, it creates a shower of pollen and obligingly fertilizes the flower that's fooded. And for the beetle, it's a one-way journey. The sides of the petals are so highly polished, it can't escape. There's another family of plants, many of which flower during these oncoming months of drought, which plays a similar trick on insects. But these plants have taken their deception a step further. They're the carrion flowers, or stapelias. With their five-star flower, they too mimic rotting flesh. Some species go so far as imitating fur, trembling in the breeze. Flies and beetles are enticed here, drawn to the odor wafting from the anthers and stamens. As they search for food, they pollinate the flower. The deception is so complete that the flies even mistakenly lay their eggs here on this false meat. But on hatching, the maggots find nothing to eat, only the deceiving smell and intense heat. They don't survive long, but soon shrivel, while the stapelia's fertilized flower slowly develops into a strange fruit. By midsummer, Namaqualand is undergoing a further transformation. The 1983 flowering is virtually over, and the countless billions of seeds produced in this extraordinary year are ripening. The swollen pods of the stapelia now spring back, offering their fluffy contents to the wind. The seeds of the daisy Ursinia are also carried by the wind, not on fluffy parachutes, but by an umbrella that looks like a petal. On landing, many find the journey is not yet complete. The ants take them underground to their nests. Today's wind-blown abundance is tomorrow's store of food. Though many of the seeds will be eaten, others are lost by the ants in their myriad tunnels, and one day will germinate, breaking out to bloom in some future Namaqualand spectacular. The seed-hoarding ants here do have their enemies. This one enters a trap created by the buckspur spider. The spider digs a hole and builds a trapdoor using its own silk, along with sand and soil. First, the sticky silk entangles the feet of the prey. When firmly caught, the spider lifts the door and pulls the ant in. The spider is never seen. It's called buckspur spider because the trap resembles the footprint of a buck or antelope among the plants. Meanwhile, millions of geranium and daisy seeds are carried by the wind to lodge where they can. The heavier seed heads of the lilies that will grow bulbs and tubers tumble in the strong wind, scattering their succulent seeds. They'll soon vanish beneath the sand. Harvester termites don't collect seeds, but feast on the dead and dried remains of the year's prolific flowering. They deftly clip and carry minute lengths of flower stem in a tireless shuttle service. Such a bumper harvest recharges the whole system of life. The puff adder, more conspicuous now that the cover is thinning, probably fed well on creatures that thrived on the season's growth. Moving through the drying plants, it now inadvertently aids the scattering of seeds as it hunts. In a boom or bust economy, some animals must be versatile and adjust their diet to whatever's available. A few weeks ago, this rock mouse was eating succulent mesums. Now it's on a drier diet. The bachmacary, a shrike, searches out both seeds and insects. Biologically, it's prudent for seed-eating birds to breed while such abundant food is available. The young of the Cape sparrows fledge when the supply of seeds is assured. 1983 is certainly no year of shortage for them. And it's not totally a boom or bust story. A few plants delay their blossoming. The botterboom guarantees its pollination by attracting sunbirds to feed when little else is in bloom. Even in the bleakest months of Namaqualand summer, the sunbirds will find sustenance. The amaryllis unfurls to shine out and claim its place in the diary of these dry February and March days. It's able to do so because it stored water back in the spring in preparation for this seemingly eccentric display. In the midst of heat and dust, a succulent beauty appears. Around it, a hidden beauty blows in the wind, the unseen millions of seeds. The flowers may bloom again in just a few months, but they might not merit so grand an entry in the diary for another quarter of a century. In all of Africa, there's perhaps no greater spectacle than the wild garden that is Namaqualand.